Hello. My name is Samantha Zessi.
It's your boy, more George Philip, the first.
And this is Maskulinity.
Yo, have you ever heard of that dude named Lin-Manuel Miranda?
I have.
Fuck that dude. You know
what
who
are you talking about? He's in fucking.
No. I mean, you need to. Yeah, okay, cool, whatever. You need to know Beto O'Byrne, because I just saw his production yesterday called "Songs from the Railway." Don't hold me to that. At the New Ohio Theater. And, for those who don't like plays,
Ohio Theater?
But you like Lin-Manuel Miranda, well, then you're perfect, because you like Beto O'Byrne's play, so go peep that. Even though tonight's last night, so never mind, you're not going to get to peep that. But just keep that in your head whenever it becomes the next Hamilton. I'm just saying.
Oh, so this is in New York, obviously. You were in New York last night?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where else would I be?
I don't know.
I'm not a jet setter like you.
Oh, please stop. I'm going to Seattle next week.
Of course you are.
I'm just kidding. It's a wedding, not my own, as my mom will tell you. But anyway, without further ado, we have been talking a lot about sex lately.
We've been talking about sex. I don't know if we've been having a lot of sex, but we've been talking about a lot of sex.
It's sporadic for me.
I mean, I'm old. What are we
That's not a good reason.
Well,
supposedly, we're supposed to be at our sexual peak since we're in our 30s. Actually, I think that's just women.
Yeah, women are like till 35. Men are like 27.
Yeah, well, okay. So anyway, guys, we're continuing with our sex module, and it's been actually pretty liberating to talk about sex so openly. And so far, we've had the opportunity to talk to some experts about men's bodies and their relationships to sex with Zat Baraka, men's empowerment coach. And, that's shed some important light in understanding how to move beyond expectations of men during sex and understanding where those expectations actually came from. We've also got to understand how being more expressive and allowing for vulnerability can lead to more fulfilling intimacy. We talked about how education, specifically education about sex.
Talking about getting paid. Pay them teachers, people.
Oh, yeah,
let's just pay all the teachers. Put the money back in education. We just fix all the problems if we just invest in education. We all know that, right? If we don't know that, well then let's get educated.
That's correct.
Just pay teachers, put the money in the schools. All the problems solved.
I mean, pretty much. So put the ducats in education because it'll make a difference in reproductive rights in that debate, okay? And specifically, we'll understand like what men can do, how crucial it is for men to be involved and men and boys to be involved in that conversation and lead from the back.
Yo, what's up?
That's a wink, wink. All right, so this week we're actually doing something a little different.
What
are we doing, Ramoy?
I think we're going to keep exploring the ways that the performance of masculinity shows up in our sex lives and how our understanding of sex, or in our understanding of sex in general. We'll see how much the four pillars of the performance of masculinity, domination, physicality, stoicism, and addiction show up in this context. Samantha will also learn how to turn off her phone.
Oh, shit. All right, so we've got some awesome folks joining us today who are excited to contribute to this conversation.
What?
I know. And we're excited to have them contribute their experiences and voices. So we've asked some New Yorkers to come through.
Newly minted New Yorkers.
I know, and give their perspectives. And we actually have quite the crew. And some have traveled from much further than New York.
Hello.
Yes, hello. Shout out to, I'll actually let them introduce themselves. So, and I just want to, say before we get started with this conversation that this is an inquiry into understanding real time how patriarchy shows up in the bedroom, right? And so, yeah, right. This is like, we're not saying sitting here trying to say like, oh, this is how it shows up and back up our point. We're really asking questions like, what does this look like for you? Or does it look like anything or nothing at all? So thank you guys all for being here. This is awesome. I'll let you introduce yourselves, whoever wishes.
Yeah. All right. So because everyone's looking at me, I'll just start.
Okay.
My name is Jason, and I'm a guy who's straight as well. I'm the person that flew in from Australia. Although I was born here, I just moved to Australia when I was 3 months old and grew up there.
I'm Jessalyn. I'm originally from Connecticut. I'm 35. I date men, but occasionally do other things with women. And I've spent the last 10 years in Colorado.
I'm Elsha, and let's see. I spent most of my life in the West Coast. My parents were polyamorous and hippies. So I was born in 1968, so you can do the math. I'm going to be 51.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Very cool. Actually, and you mentioned you're also polyamorous.
Yeah, so I'm polyamorous as
Cool.
well. So
Okay.
it's quite interesting to hear that your parents were polyamorous, especially for like the generation above. That's really progressive for their.
I think it was really quite common
Back in the day.
back in the days, in the 60s, yeah.
All right,
And
cool.
even more so in Utah.
Fair. We're really at work and trying to understand kind of where our notions of sex come from, the notions of kind of the rules of sex and what we've come to understand that our roles in sex should be. And so I guess our first question is like, how did you learn about sex?
Yeah, well, for me, I learned about sex looking at the parties that my parents were at. They were very open. It was interesting, like I had been to nudist parks and beaches, but I had also been to nudist parties. So I think that's how I learned, because I was thinking about it, and I think I must have seen something,
Okay. And
Yeah.
what did you learn actually? Like
I learned that it was very sensual, and it was acts of love and joy, and that they were really having a good time. They were enjoying themselves. Yeah, so no inhibitions. Freedom, yeah, definitely. So, and during the hippie era, it was like all about love, Yeah.
Let's see. So I would say there was like a couple different influences that taught me about it. One was my mom, my parents, just having like a somewhat responsible discussion that's always like so incomplete and you don't want to hear about it because it's your parents. You're like, ew, can this just be over? Can this I don't want to know. And I was at Catholic school. My family was pretty complete couples, if that makes sense. Like, I had a lot of cousins growing up. Most of them were with their spouses, had kids. Like, that was sort of my image of like coupledom and romance.
like hetero couples?
Yeah, hetero couples that had children. That was sort of, my frame of reference. Catholic school was, I think growing up in Connecticut where there's so much diversity and, it's very liberal, that's like there's this notion of like, well, we're in Catholic school, but like none of us really subscribe to this. So we had like a little bit of, sex education that happened in 6th grade and was, again, incomplete. And like, oh, by the way, our church says this is wrong, but you do you. And then I'd say like the next thing that educated me was when I was like 13 years old. I was supposed to be doing my summer reading for honors English, but I picked up one of my mom's romance novels instead. And if anyone's read like a romance novel, it's like female erotica, it's porn with a love story, it's girl porn. And I'd say like that was my next like, oh, this is how it works.
Okay.
So
we're going to return to that.
okay,
Cool.
do.
I want to know
It's
more
pretty
about
funny.
that. Yeah. Okay, cool.
For me, it was like so there were a couple of avenues. So school, sex education started at I went to an all boys school, a private school in Perth, Western Australia. That's where I live. And so we started sex education in year 5, which was pretty early on. Then I had movies which sort of taught me about sex, and then porn.
I'm going.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I don't think I ever was. 21 maybe, because I grew up in the Texas Panhandle. I grew up in a single mother. Went to a Christian school. All these things were like, you'll figure it out, and we don't want to talk about it because it's sex and it's gross. So throughout junior high and high school, I'd heard stuff, and your friends are imagining stuff and inventing stuff, and you think you know what you're talking about, but half of it's just stuff somebody's brother told somebody or something you may have seen on the internet, but the internet was barely alive, so you can't really see anything. It's just pixels. And so only until I came in Texas education system, like it was like one class period in 10th or 11th grade, and the coach who was teaching it was too uncomfortable to teach us. So I didn't really learn anything until I became an adult, and then maybe even until I moved to New York and felt comfortable actually having these conversations on the regular. But for the most part, I wasn't taught anything. The rules I learned were very uninformed and almost like from TV, movies, and my peers, like my friends, my guy friends, right?
You know, in France, after like 11, there's just like erotica on TV. So I would like watch that when I was like 9. And that was kind of my understanding of what sex was. But I think one of the main things that I learned there is that there was a certain way that I had to look in order to be desirable for sex. And I think that quickly kind of, because I didn't look like that kind of quickly informed the ways that I felt that I was desirable or not. And so I think that, you know, to segue into our next question, that I kind of understood the ways that, you know, a feminine partner should be or act or look to be deserving or worthy of the type of attention that would warrant her being desirable. And so I'm wondering, you know, when you pointed out the romance novel, right? I've only read like 2 romance novels in my life, but that shit was wild.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was wild. And it was like it was called Facade. And one of the characters was like this high school student messing around with like this older dude or whatever. And like some of the language that they described it felt so perverse, but also was like so sensational and clutching that I read the book in like 2 days. Just in terms of your own understandings of sex and your own understandings of specifically kind of the messaging that you talk about, kind of how that informed the ways that you thought that a feminine partner, a masculine partner, whether that was you or your partner, how that informed the way you thought that sex should go.
I feel like I need to break down romance novels a little bit because it was definitely like pre any sort of actual male interaction. So I feel like it definitely made me think a storyline, like a certain thing was going to unfold, right? So most of the ones I read were like historical. And in that context, most of them have like a certain script they follow where like a guy and a girl meet. And generally she's like married to him like right away, or some sort of like she's like sold to him, which is like already a weird, right? I know, yes, the way you're looking at me, it's like there's like already kind of like this non-consensual vibe, but it's like, but in a good way. It always came off in a good way. Okay. And then there's like this instant attraction between the two characters. And they're kind of like fighting themselves, right? Because initially they like meet and like they don't hit it off the right way. She's like resentful and he's like, you know, whatever, I have no reason to care about this person. So there's all these undertones that are already like weird. And so then they meet there, but there's this chemistry and there's this underlying like, well, we don't really know each other. And then generally maybe like 9 out of 10 romance novels, if they don't meet and have to like actually develop a relationship to get married, if there's one of these like marriage situations like where, oh, he's the English lord and or whatever, and she's, you know, betrothed to him. So then there's like a wedding night, right, which happens like way before this person actually wants to have sex with this other person. And then there's like this tenderness and there's like not very much communication, and then they are like figuring it out and it's amazing and mind-blowing without there being like a ton of give and take or communication or even like a solid basis for a relationship. And then there's always like this notion of like, and then you just get swept up in the feeling of it and it's just, there's an explosion and then he's like showing her new sides of herself and she's whatever. And then generally a relationship follows. I think it really intimidated me because there was this notion of what would happen and that there wasn't like a ton of maybe prep or communication or context or whatever.
Or like time to choose, or like actually have a say in what happens.
Yeah, and I guess like my high school crushes or whatever, it was all like very, and I guess this goes for anyone because like most people are exposed in our generation are exposed to pornography, but there was just like sort of this loadedness of like sexual chemistry and energy before maybe there was like a solid relationship or rapport. And I think it maybe inhibited my communication because I had this model of relationships and sex with like, there wasn't a whole lot of figuring it out in what I was reading. There wasn't like navigating a relationship or boundaries or kind of winning someone over. It was like this thing that just happened. And so I think it made me a little bit of a passive participant a lot in getting close to someone. And, I think like the over-sexualization of our generation, of women in our generation, is like kind of a common thing. Like it's an accepted, like, yeah, that happens.
See, my first girlfriend was Iraqi Muslim, right? And I'm like, my heritage is Palestinian Christian, and so our first sexual experiences was sort of really awkward in the sense that there was so much. I mean, like she carried a lot of shame with the idea of sex and everything, so I tried to actively make her feel as comfortable as possible to talk about it. And at the time, because I mean, my sexual side is much in line with like kink and BDSM. So, and during that time, like that was something which I was unaware of, that I wasn't taught about. That's not taught about in school or anything like that. And I learned most of what I know from that from pornography, like at that time. But I still would think, like, oh, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, actually, like, looking up, like, counselors. And, I mean, I discovered that part of myself or enacted that part of myself, like, not until my mid-20s. But going back to, like, what was expected of me during sex in the earlier years, especially with her, it was like a learning curve that we sort of embarked on together. But when we started becoming more sexual and everything, I mean, like, she wanted to try anal before we actually had sex because there was like some sort of like complex that she didn't want to lose her virginity or like felt that sacred. And that was a very traumatizing experience, like for me, but mainly for her, because like I remember when we first tried it, we had no idea what we were doing, and she started like freaking out and crying, and then I was like, oh shit, like what do I do? So I just automatically had to like, or felt like obligated to take on like the more of like the role of like a comforter sort of person while trying to process the shit myself, as in like what the fuck is going on. And then after that experience, she's like, oh, you know what, like fuck it, like let's just have sex. And that was the first time that I had sex. That was my introduction to that sort of world. But then, you know, we became like, you know, good friends in the sense that, oh, let's watch porn together and try things that we want to try.
And do you think that like your kind of the role that you ended up playing in that relationship was kind of shaped by that experience, in the sense that you kind of had to be kind of the comfort,
or like to just, I felt like it was a masculine thing to do, to try and like to ensure that whoever you're having sex with feels safe and comfortable. And like thinking about it, like I don't think that is, like I think that goes for both sex, like on both things, like for both genders or whatever, that it's important to be aware of the comfort and safety of the person that you're having sex with.
Yeah.
Okay. But I guess, only because like I was taught more about sex than she was, that's why I thought I was more obligated. So it was more to do with that than it was to do with gender.
Okay. So in the sense that you were more empowered through your education, and so you felt like you had more tools to kind of navigate the situation. Correct. And so, you could kind of be okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I first had sex with a woman. a girl. We were quite young, maybe 13 and a half. And it was very free. It was very comfortable. There were no inhibitions between what we were doing to each other. We were very relaxed and innocent in a lot of ways. And there wasn't that conscientious guilt afterwards. Like, I think that for me, why I say that is because then I was with a boy that had been bothering me for many years, wanting to date me in junior high school. And I was a year ahead of him, and then he came to high school. And I finally broke down and said, when I was 16, okay, for your 15th birthday, I'll have sex with you. And that is what set my tone of rules of engagement, of sexual engagement, because immediately after we had sex, he ignored me at school. He didn't talk to me. Every time he saw me, he would start whispering with his buddies. And it was almost like a shock to my system. In fact, it was a shock to my system because my previous experience with the girl was very free and loving and genuine. And with him, it was like he just said all the right things to get me. And as soon as he got me, I was trash. I was immediately worth nothing to him. Not even enough to talk to me. So that kind of scarred me for a while. And of course I got over that over the years, but I mean, that was kind of my tone with men. The rules of engagement are so different. And in my parents' lifestyle and growing up and seeing that behavior was a shock to me because my parents and their friends, they weren't like that, It was about free love and sharing genuine sensuality, and that to me was kind of whoa, oh my God, this is different. For a long while, it was I had to be really careful. I felt I had a shield around me, and I was I can't be myself. I can't just have sex with somebody in the first date. I can't really show how interested I am in that person. And, for me to get a really deep connection, I think it's not only the mind, but also physically, if I feel a bonding that way. And I definitely would say that for many years, and even now, I am more reluctant to be myself in the beginning because probably I would have immediately gotten in bed with most of those men, pretty quickly. Yeah.
If you had been more free, you mean?
Yeah. But
Okay.
I definitely was more guarded, and yeah.
I don't associate actions like that with the term masculinity because I don't think that's a very masculine thing to do.
What do you think would be a masculine way to react to that?
Well, to condemn those type of actions and everything, I think masculinity, for me anyway, is more to do with caring and to do with like safety and all that sort of stuff. I think it's a masculine thing to do that after you have sex with someone that you respect them and you get to know them and you do all that sort of stuff. Whereas when I hear stuff and that's why I don't associate douchebagness, with the term because it's not and it's not that sort of stuff isn't gender exclusive either. There I have friends of mine that have had similar experiences, with women and I mean also with other men as well. So when I hear stuff like that, you know what I mean, and that. Those type of actions or those type of mentality, I think that's associating that stuff with the term masculinity is wrong in a sense, because I don't think that's a very masculine thing to do or a masculine way to treat another human being.
Well, I do feel like it's pretty typical though for male behavior. I mean, maybe more so the typical white male.
like of
Yeah.
those type of things. I
Yeah.
mean, like, when I was the only like ethnic Middle Eastern person in my year, like in like a predominantly white school, and then you had like a lot of Southeast Asian kids who were like boarders and stuff, and we had like a sister school where actually my sister went to as well, like which was an all girls school and that, and it was like the culture was more so that the guys would run around the girls and do anything they could to, you know what I mean, you were cool if like you had a couple of like friends that were girls and stuff like that. And it was like, for me at the time, it felt that they had, when it comes to like relationships and social status, like the power to, make someone popular or to not make someone popular. And you wouldn't like, in my experience, hear that, but that doesn't, like, I'm not oblivious to the fact that that happens,
But wait, isn't the fact that the reason why, I mean, and definitely correct me on this, but
Sure.
isn't the reason why they would be more popular for having like friends who were girls kind of like a level of, I mean, it's a different type of level of acquisition, but it sounds a little bit like a bit of level of acquisition in the sense that it's like, it like ups your status to have women around you because women are upping your status, not necessarily by virtue of being themselves, but just by virtue of the fact that they're women.
Yeah, there was like, it was by the virtue of them being girls that sort of made the guys that hanged around with girls popular, but like it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was more of like an acquisition sort of thing. It was just because like, man, that hasn't been, because it was so new to us, and it was like new experiences, and you would like see movies and stuff, and like of course like you'd be interested in sex, and if someone like knowing that someone else like had done something sexual with a girl and everything, they would be seen, or not be like, they have had experiences that the far like majority of students in the year wouldn't have had, and that's how there would be some sort of social value attributed to that.
Okay.
But it wasn't like a possessive, they owned women sort of thing. It was just like, they got to interact with girls, and we're in an all boys school, we never get to do that.
But was it an angle? Was it an angle to get with the girls?
What, to like be friends with the guys that not for me, because like to me, like, I mean, I wasn't really friends with those type of people, and because of like I was still trying to figure out all like the kink stuff that was going, so I like actively avoided trying to be intimate with women because of that. And I guess that's why I got along with my first girlfriend so well, because like she had no, like, she wasn't a very like, she wasn't really sexually active in the sense, so like we would just hang out and talk about things like religion and like spirituality and all that sort of stuff. And it was like and then until eventually like it sort of brought up, like I want to try this and I want to try that, and then that whole like episode happened.
It kind of sounds like the way you're talking about you and your guy friends like acquiring women friends is almost like, I don't know, what I would think of the opposite of patriarchy, because it sounds like you had to sort of show that you were a worthwhile guy to have around, like to be in the company of these women. Maybe I'm wrong about
more
that,
or less.
but
maybe things are just different on the other side of the hemisphere.
well, can I jump in a moment?
Yeah.
So I wanted to just thank you for something that you said when you were like, I don't think that's masculinity. I think that's douchebaggery. Like I that was like healing balm to my soul, first of all. Even though there are obviously different standards of masculinity and what is acceptable within a patriarchy. And then
Can I pause there for a second?
Yes.
Because I want to say, like, I think this is like a really good way, a good time to clarify that there's like masculinity and then there's the performance of masculinity. And I think that, when we're talking about the traits that are considered to be masculine, for example, being a provider, being a leader, all of these things that we kind of align with like masculine energy, so to speak, that's different from someone being alienated after having sex with them. That that's not necessarily like a masculine trait as much as the performance of like one of the pillars of masculinity, which is like stoicism, right? Or dominance or something like that, which is not necessarily masculinity in and of itself, but a demonstration of, because we're living in a patriarchal system, then I get to dominate over you in this way now that you've given me, you know, like because of the deflowering or something like that. So I want to point that out in the sense that there's like a performance of masculinity, and then there's like actually a masculine energy in the traits that we understand as masculine, which are separate, which we're hoping to kind of like highlight as being separate on the show.
So I think I know your answer here, but are you saying that maybe her experience of masculinity is our patriarchal version of masculinity?
Yes.
Okay. I thought you were going there, but I just wanted to put that on finishing the last point, which was how we learn. Because I think what her experience highlighted is something that has to be like is learned and then has to be unlearned.
Yeah.
Which is like that initial shame around sexuality and that very fucked up mixed message of, you are absolutely a sexual creature. And by the way, if you act in a sexual way, like you will be ostracized. You will be treated like less than a human.
Yeah.
You will be like shamed by the person who you made yourself vulnerable to in every way, like physically, emotionally, society, like your social stigma, like what you experienced in that social scene. And I think the reason that hits home is like two reasons. I just came from a women's sexuality conference where we talked a lot about shame and the patriarchal messages that we take on as sexual beings. And I think just like in my own experience, like sort of learning, coming from, my parents were not polyamorous, but obviously my mom allowed me to read romance novels. And her justification was like, oh, there's nothing wrong with that. And it's like, but then coming into a situation where you're meeting the physical world and you realize, wait, there actually is something very wrong with that. Or at least that's the message that I'm getting. And like, yeah, it's something that you have to unlearn, and it's something that needs to be navigated. So.
Well, actually, this is a perfect segue for us to go into like the next question, which is, I mean, you touched on a few things here in terms of have sex with somebody, like be kind of like a sexual person for me, but don't be a sexual person for yourself, essentially, is kind of like what I heard in what you were saying. And so I'm just wondering if we can kind of take a moment to stop there for a second and take a look at what are our expectations of partners during sex, like not necessarily because they're aligned with that, but there could be a departure from that. Like, is it like a partnered experience where people are communicating and really, because like you described a lot of like kind of working together and all of that in your own experiences, Jason, and then, or is it kind of like, okay, well, there's something that you have that I want, and so we're going to work on me getting that, and then I'm going to move on with my life.
Maybe I'm a little bit selfish, but I think a guy is kind of there for the woman, and I maybe because of my liberal mother or my reading in romance novels, you know, I almost like I'm just going to kind of take a bold step there. Like, yes, it is a partnered and connected and intimate experience. Absolutely. But I almost think it's more important in terms of the gender or spiritual modes of being. Sorry if I'm saying this badly. That like a guy is there for the pleasure and satisfaction of a woman. If that's not part of the game, like it's almost taken for granted that like he's going to get his pleasure. I think the pace and almost everything else, it's like if I let you in, like you're there for me. That's my expectation.
Cool.
Oof. I can't help but to like, I don't. to disagree with what you said. I don't think. I think that whoever is participating in sex are both there for each other, and I think that men can be just as vulnerable as women when it comes to like sex and stuff like that. Especially like from like my experiences with kink and all that sort of stuff, because you do put yourself in very vulnerable positions, and there is like a level of like trust and comfort that is expected from a partner that you're letting into in that sort of way. In terms of like, I mean, I try not to have any expectations at all, like from people. I don't expect this or that, but if we're having sex, then it's a sort of given that, okay, the general basis or the premise that we're engaging in sex is that we both feel safe, we both feel comfortable, we both want to pleasure each other. And I think those are like the sort of foundations, I guess, in sexual engagement for myself.
But I think a lot of what you say, like, does exist. Like, there is an intimacy, there is an agreement, there are two people present. So I just wanted to maybe justify that, like, I hear what you're saying, and I think that's present for my view as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's explicitly present in your view, though, because I think that one thing that's kind of present in what he's saying is that there's like pleasure and safety for both people, and I think that your view it infers or it assumes that there's like the dude is obviously going to get pleasure, and because of that he needs to make sure that you have pleasure. And as a woman, I can't speak to whether or not that's true, because I know that I've been in situations where I have not gotten pleasure, but the dude has always gotten pleasure. But I would be curious to hear if there are times when a dude doesn't get pleasure and a woman does. Because, like, I think that one of the things that we've been talking about on the show is just that, you know, there's a way in which sex is, like, basically what we were talking about before, right? Like, a woman is there to provide kind of like a sexual being for somebody to enjoy, but like is not in patriarchal rules allowed to enjoy her own sexuality for herself. And I feel like that presupposes that, yes, dudes are going to get pleasure no matter what. And I'm not saying that I disagree with you necessarily. I'm questioning the language of it. And I'm also questioning whether, like, as somebody who is not a man, like, what a man would have to say about that, about the fact that, like, you just assume that we're going to get pleasure because we're, like, having sex with you. But maybe that's not true. Maybe I actually need a little bit more, I don't know, TLC or whatever.
Okay, there were a couple assumptions or a couple maybe, like, unspoken things. I guess one thing I didn't speak is that, like, if I'm being intimate with someone, like, I assume that I am going to have a degree of, like, taking care of them emotionally and physically, and I didn't say that part. And let's see. I think for me, of course, there are times when, like, I am purely pleasuring my partner who I'm with. There are times when my partner is pleasuring me. I generally am more interested in acts that pleasure us both. I guess what I was putting forth is I think that there's a patriarchal concept like what you're talking about, that like a woman is like a receptacle for a man's pleasure. And I think it's more so like you are the, how do I say this even? Like you are each other's, like, I don't even want to use the word receptacle, but it's like you find it in each other. It's a mutual,
it's a give and take
act.
I've experienced quite a bit the opposite when it comes to that type of man that just wants his pleasure and is not so concerned about the other person because they're really not really maybe probably interested in the future. So I know right away when a man is not really interested in a real relationship, maybe just a fuck buddy, right? So,
but I feel like even in fuck buddyism, you should be able to like want to please your partner, and so I get what you're getting at.
I think kind of the playboy type, though.
Mhm.
There's all different types, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, good sex, and for me as being, I want to be with someone genuine, and that means if they're genuine, they're going to know that it's proper etiquette, I guess you could say, in the bedroom to receive and to give, period.
There are certain things which are associated with like the term like masculinity, which I don't associate with masculinity, you know, in that sort of respect. Like I think being masculine is being genuine, you know, like not like doing whatever it takes to get someone in the sack and then fuck off. Like that's like that, and that's not exclusive to men either, though. Like that's the thing.
Well, that's my question. It's like, so I'm not sure why that's aligned with masculinity, essentially.
I guess because like we're so used to like just drawing the two together, like because there are a lot of like, I don't know, men tend to be like loud and and so when they're a douchebag that really stands out, and then you're like, oh look at I don't know. I'm just speculating.
A lot of masculinity that we talk about, at least, like the messaging that happens and the kind of the learnings that happen with what is masculine is the entitlement that you're at the top of or the idea that you're at the top of the food chain, and anything subsequent or sub that is not human or can be easily objectified, and so on and so forth. So if you were to subscribe to traditional, at least Western masculinity, or kind of associate with it, it's under those ideas or those tenets of like men are at the top of the food chain, and anything else is beneath that. Even like hetero men are at the top of the food chain. Anything beneath that is less than human, not human, and easily objectifiable. And here for me as the true animal, as the true being, and everybody else is not. Everybody's here at my disposal.
That's why I think this podcast is so important, because that shit needs to be redefined, like ASAP, you know, and like what we know and consider as masculinity should not be what you just described. It should be something which is based around integrity or based around respect. Like that's what the word should be associated with, so that when young men grow up hearing that term, that's what they associate that term with.
I love that you're saying that. I love that you're saying that, you know, there needs to be kind of like a redefinition of what young men and boys can associate with. I'm going to go further in questioning you in the sense that there's a level of how we're talking about respect, about being genuine, about care, about protection, that is something that's human. That's like, those are good human traits.
Correct.
But then there's like a level to which when we kind of associate them with masculinity, when we associate them with femininity even, like so caring usually, I mean, I know you mentioned caring, but a lot of times like caring, rearing, kind of like caretaking is associated kind of as a more of a feminine trait, like being thoughtful and things like that. And so when we're associating those things kind of like with masculinity and femininity, and then you've got patriarchy on top of that, then we kind of get in situations like that, you know, where like what Roboy is talking about, like where now we're saying like being genuine, being, you know, respectful, being basically an awesome person is associated with being masculine. If we're functioning within a patriarchy still, that still gives people who are mostly identified with that a certain type of domination over others, even if it's in line with something that's virtuous. And so I guess what I'm questioning is like when we're talking about sex, for example, right? It's like there are levels, there are ways in which there are very specific people who are entering a situation together where they're coming into consent, which actually is very much in line with what you described, right, with your first girl.
Yeah.
You know, and then but then there's also like the rules that are beyond them that they're functioning within. And so when we're thinking about those rules and kind of applying the ways in which, like, even though two people are engaging in this sexual action, they're unless they're really taking the time to highlight the ways that patriarchy is actually stepping into the bedroom with them, then all of those things that we've been describing kind of why, if that makes sense, I'm questioning the alignment of virtuous qualities with any gender.
Okay.
Because I feel like that's essentially the way that we start to dehumanize each other. And then when it seeps into the bedroom where rules are a little bit different because we all have different types of things that we like, things get a little bit more insidious, and you get things like it's like the romance novel, right? Where like women are getting swept off their feet and not really knowing kind of what decisions they're making, but they're actually spending the rest of their lives with somebody. And not only did they not necessarily have like a choice supposedly in it, but they like it. And that's actually how it's supposed to function. And like, for me, I very much thought, and in some ways, I still very much think that in some way, shape, or form, I'm supposed to be swept off my feet. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm supposed to have Idris Elba come in here and fucking fly me into, you know what I mean? And that actually,
Elba can walk here and take me wherever the fuck he wants.
you know, and it's like, and I have to question myself on that, because those are things that, you know, when we talk about, for example, you know, the expectations of your masculine and feminine partner, the things that you were talking about in terms of like protection, providing. For me, I'm very much like, I'm like an independent person and stuff, but I hate making decisions. So I like when people take charge, but like make space for me, right? And so what that shows up like in the bedroom is something like this, like something a little bit protective, you know, still after like my pleasure, making sure that I'm safe or whatever. But then also, being in charge, taking control, right? And I have to challenge myself on that, because I'm like, something like that's mad patriarchal. But like, if I say it's okay in my room, then it's fine. But then what does that look like for the rest of our relationship? What does that look like for the way that I'm thinking about femininity and masculinity, and the way that I then go talk to like my niece or something about it? Or like that I interact with like younger people, or like my women friends and my guy friends or whatever, about the way that, you know, like what gender equity actually looks like. Like I have to always question it. And so that's the reason why I'm kind of like pulling that apart a little bit.
My body has to be in my biochemistry literally has to be in a certain state to receive a male. Like, I have to be feeling safe. I can't be like in fight or flight or feeling stressed. In order for my body to produce moisture, and wetness isn't necessarily readiness, there's wetness, and then there's like the physical state of relaxation where I can actually be in pleasure. So both of those requirements have to be met for like my body to be in like a sexual state of pleasure with a man. And so when I kind of said like a guy is there for me, I think I'm more so talking about like there has to be an awareness that like a couple of those requirements need to be met. So I'm not talking about like a guy's there for me to get off. I'm talking about like a guy is maybe there like in like present moment with me, like understanding that like how intimacy and pleasure works for both of us.
I will go further in affirming your point, in the sense that I think that women in general are expected to be that there's not really usually room in sex for women to not be that, for them to not really be like point. Ready, willing, that's excited really already. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right. That is assuming a guy actually wants it. That is assuming that.
Right.
And that he feels
like you're in a consensual
emotionally confident.
I think it's the basic principle of like mutual respect. Like you want, like I would like whether I was like a man or a woman, like I would hate knowing that like my partner is not like feeling comfortable and to experience pleasure and everything like that. That would just make me feel so weird. You know what I mean?
Well, I just wanted to say and affirm you that you have boundaries. This is what I require. This is what I need before I'm going to have intimacy with someone. And I respect that. But I don't believe that it's the norm at all. I think women do not set boundaries for themselves. I also think women want to please so much that they go without their needs being met. I have different views of how I behave. When I'm with a woman, I'm more of the masculine partner. I feel caring, and I also want to please, but at the same time, I want to be in control of what's happening and what we're doing. And it's a different roadmap for me entirely, because when I'm with a male and a man, I mean, it's like I kind of want to surrender and give, him the pleasure and be that woman and kind of just let go and have him in control. So it's interesting that I feel these two different roles. And the only thing I can think of is the fact that, although my father was in my life, he wasn't really an active father or an active parent. And I think I missed somebody like being fatherly to me and being like, hey, this is what we're going to do, or no, that's not allowed, or, I didn't have that. I think that for me, when I'm in the bedroom with a man, I'm kind of looking for that person to direct and to be in control, because I was really desperately missing that male presence in my life. And then for me, as a female with a female, I feel like in a lot of ways, like I want to kind of feel and experience what it would be to be the male.
Yeah.
And it's hard because, of course, I don't have the anatomy. But I want to feel that type of control and guiding, and not in a bad way, but in a sensual way. And it's very interesting where I've let it go to.
It's interesting because most of my partners, they even with myself, we're all more on the sort of submissive side of the spectrum, and my introduction to kink, when I remember, up until then, my third monogamous relationship was when I was introduced to kink, and that was when I was 24, 25 years old. My friend downloaded Tinder on my phone out of me being very skeptical of it at first, and literally the first person that I matched with, I ended up in a year-long relationship with. Wow. So, but when I met this person, we were talking about, oh, what's the craziest shit you've done? And then she was telling me about, all this kinky sort of shit that she's done. I'm just hang on a second, wait a minute, this is normal? And she's like, oh, honey, there's a whole fucking rabbit hole you can go down. But what was very confronting for me was that she told me that she had a rape fantasy. And for me, I was just holy shit, I can't really judge, because I like being tied up and dominated and all that sort of stuff too. So I try to listen with an open mind as possible, and it because I knew girls that were my friends that have had been sexually assaulted and everything, so that was very hard for me to sort of take on. And but there was this underlying tone that she did she liked to be dominated and control. And I remember it was the first time I tried to do that for her was so fucking awkward. But then we communicated and it got better over time. And then I started enjoying the dom side of things as well as the sub side of things. But
nurture.
Yeah, but then most ever since that relationship, most of the women that I've been with that have been into kink have always been more on the submissive side, not necessarily to the extent of having a rape fantasy, but they always describe the same thing, which was they like to be taken and desired, that the feeling of taken and desired and
I was just saying romance novel. I was putting such a romance novel thing. I had that, yeah.
But then you learn to have fun with it, and when you start getting comfortable and you know someone like that, you can literally talk about anything from that point on. But what I found with is most of the women that I am with and I've been with, like to be taken and or swept off their feet, sort of say, like not necessarily like abused or anything, but that feeling of like being desired so much that, you know, the man can't just like control himself, that he has to like take her and hug her and kiss her and throw her on the bed and have his way with her, sort of thing. So like that's sort of, I don't know if that's what I'm picking up like from what you've been describing, but like that's my experience with,
which I think is really interesting, because it's like really just like a point to just how it's kind of complicit in patriarchy and like male domination, but in a way where you want it. It turns you on, you know, so it's like a different thing. But anyway,
it's not something that I wanted to.
No, I meant as women, like the women that you're describing want that. Yeah, is what I meant. I just want to say, you guys, you can find us on Masculinity Podcast at whoistheo.com. If you want to send us an email, please do. At Masculinity Pod on Twitter, and Masculinity Podcast on Facebook, and Masculinity Pod on Instagram, actually. Always with a K. You guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you all for being here. What an awesome conversation about sex. Please send us your comments, your questions about what you have to say about that. And in the meantime, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
And in the meantime, you know, my name is Samantha Zessi.
Roy George Philip the first.
And this has been Masculinity. Thank you for listening.
Peace.
Ciao.